This sounds like a joke. A sinking ocean liner from 1912 helping decide where a football tournament gets played in 2022. It should not make sense. No serious historian would connect these two events on purpose. And yet, the wiring between them is real, traceable, and stranger than anything you would invent. Start with the night everyone knows. April 15th, 1912. The RMS Titanic strikes an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sinks in under 3 hours. More than 1,500 people die. It becomes the most famous shipwreck in modern history. But the disaster itself is not the part of the story that matters here. What matters is what happened in the days after, in a cramped radio room on the roof of a New York department store. Nearby, ships never heard the Titanic's distress calls in time. Some radio operators were off duty, others were buried in commercial chatter, sending private telegrams instead of listening for emergencies. The United States Senate opened an inquiry almost immediately. It was led by a Michigan senator named William Alden Smith. His investigation exposed a wireless system with no real rules, no required watch hours, no licensing standard, a brand new technology running on good intentions and nothing else. That failure created the first domino. Congress passed the Radio Act of 1912. Every passenger ship now needed continuous, round-the-clock wireless coverage. Operators needed a federal license to work the key. Overnight, wireless telegraphy stopped being a hobbyist toy and became a licensed profession with real stakes attached to it. Somebody had to relay the news to a frightened public. That somebody was a 21-year-old immigrant named David Sarnoff, managing the Marconi wireless station above Wanamaker's department store in New York. Here is where the story gets complicated and where you have to be careful. For decades, the popular version claimed young Sarnoff sat alone at his telegraph key for 72 straight hours, the sole hero pulling survivor names out of the static. It is a great story. It is also, according to most historians who have gone back through the record, largely exaggerated, mostly by Sarnoff himself, years later, once he had power and a reputation to protect. Other operators worked that station too, but the myth stuck, and myths move history just as effectively as facts do. The Titanic gave Sarnoff a story to tell about himself, and that story opened doors. He climbed fast inside the Marconi Company. By 1919, when the US government pushed for an American-owned radio company to replace foreign-controlled Marconi assets, Sarnoff was positioned perfectly. The Radio Corporation of America, RCA, was born. Sarnoff had already been pitching an idea his bosses ignored for years, a radio music box for the home, a device that could bring entertainment into ordinary living rooms instead of just ship-to-shore telegrams. Once he had real authority inside RCA, he got the chance to prove it. In July 1921, Sarnoff helped broadcast a heavyweight boxing match between Jack Dempsey and Georges Carpentier over the airwaves. Something like 300,000 people listened. That single broadcast did something enormous, and it is easy to miss if you are not looking for it. It proved that a live event, not a song, not a lecture, a live sporting event, could pull a mass audience out of nowhere and hold it. Advertisers noticed, investors noticed. A new economic model was born. Sell access to a live audience, not just a ticket at the gate. RCA formalized that model in 1926 by launching NBC, the national broadcasting company, built specifically to sell sponsored programming to a national audience. Radio, and later television, stopped being just a device. It became a business built on one repeating idea. Live events generate advertising money, and whoever owns the broadcast rights controls the real prize. This is the part of the chain that quietly keeps building for the next several decades, mostly out of sight. Skip ahead. Television spreads across the world after the Second World War. Satellite broadcasting arrives in the 1960s, and organizations that run global sporting events start to realize something that a boxing match in 1921 already hinted at. Broadcast rights, not stadium tickets, are where the real money lives. FIFA, the governing body of world football, leans into this harder than almost anyone. The 1954 World Cup gets its first live television broadcast. By the 1970s and 1980s, satellite technology turns the World Cup into a genuinely global media event, watched simultaneously across continents that could never have shared a live signal before. By the time the 21st century arrives, FIFA's entire financial engine runs on broadcast and sponsorship money, not ticket sales, and that changes what a country needs to offer if it wants to host the tournament. It is no longer really a question of who has the best stadiums, it is a question of who can guarantee the biggest media spectacle, the friendliest television time zones, the deepest sponsorship pockets, and the most global attention. Hosting the World Cup becomes, in effect, an audition for a broadcast contract wearing a football jersey. Enter Qatar, a small peninsula in the Persian Gulf, sitting on some of the largest natural gas reserves on Earth. Under Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, who took power in 1995, Qatar pursued a deliberate strategy of turning enormous energy wealth into global visibility. He founded Al Jazeera in 1996, building an international broadcaster from scratch in a region that barely had one before. He backed international sporting events. He pushed Qatari money into European football clubs and global investment portfolios. He understood correctly that in a media-driven world, visibility itself had become a form of power. In December 2010, FIFA's executive committee voted to award Qatar the right to host the 2022 World Cup. It was the first World Cup ever awarded to a nation in the Middle East. Qatar had no football pedigree to speak of. What it had was almost unlimited capital, a media strategy decades in the making, and a bid built around the exact things global broadcasting now valued most: spectacle, reach, and a story the world could not stop talking about, for better or worse. None of this means the Titanic sank so that Qatar could host a football tournament a century later. That would be absurd, and it would insult the people who actually built each link in this chain on purpose. What it means is something quieter and more unsettling. A regulatory failure exposed by a maritime disaster helped professionalize wireless communication. That professionalized wireless industry created the conditions for the commercial broadcasting to exist at all. Commercial broadcasting discovered that live sporting events were its most valuable product. That discovery pushed global sports organizations toward a broadcast-first business model. And that broadcast-first model rewrote the rules for what it takes to host the world's biggest tournament. Rules a small, gas-rich nation on the other side of the planet turned out to be perfectly built to win. Look at your own life for a second. Every time you watch a match on a streaming app, every time a sponsor's logo flashes across a stadium wall, every time a broadcast deal decides which country gets to host a global event, you are standing at the end of a chain that started with a distress signal nobody heard in time. The Titanic did not cause the Qatar World Cup, but it helped build the entire system that made a World Cup like that possible in the first place, and you were never meant to notice the wiring underneath.